This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. The cicadas whine like they've been cursed. Missouri air thick with sweat and gunpowder. And a barefoot boy trudges behind a plow, squinting toward a horizon that keeps catching fire. The year is 1859. And you're not in the heart of America, you're in its fever dream. Every whisper of wind carries another tale of blood. Every shadow hides a cause someone's ready to kill for. This boy, Jesse, he's just 12. And he already knows the price of crossing someone. His father's dead, his brother's gone to fight, and his mother is about to learn what it means to be suspected. You probably won't survive this decade, let alone this family. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in Clay County, Missouri. It's still called the Little Dixie, for how deeply it mirrors the culture of the South, slaveholding, secession-leaning, and already boiling over with tension. Jesse Woodson James is born in 1847 into this bubbling pot. And his early life, it's far less glamorous than the stagecoach chases or train-robbing escapades you've read about. His father, Robert James, is a Baptist minister and farmer, but not for long. He joins a group heading west for gold and missionary work in California, abandoning his family when Jesse is just a toddler. He never comes back. Some say fever took him. Others whisper of bandits. Either way, Jesse's first lesson in life is this: men leave. And sometimes they don't return. Jesse's mother, Zerelda, is no delicate Southern belle. She's 6 feet tall, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective. After her husband dies, she remarries, badly. Her new husband, a gruff man named Benjamin Sims, reportedly whips young Jesse and his older brother Frank. That doesn't last long. Zerelda divorces him after just a few years. The next man, Dr. Reuben Samuel, stays. He's gentler, but he can't shield the boys from what's coming. Frank James, the older brother by 4 years, reads Shakespeare and rides horses like he was born to it. He joins the Confederate cause early, too early. Depending who you ask, Jesse idolizes him, and when Union soldiers raid the family farm in 1863, accusing him of harboring bushwhackers, Jesse's life takes a sharp turn. You're there when the soldiers storm in, Zerelda's yelling, the livestock scatter, and Jesse, just 16, gets whipped until his back is raw. Historians still argue whether this was the turning point, but you feel something break in him that day. It doesn't heal. The war isn't just battles in neat lines and fancy uniforms. Here in Missouri, it's brother against brother, bushwhacker versus jayhawker, a chaos where flags mean less than grudges. Jesse soon joins a band of Confederate guerrillas, including the infamous William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson. This isn't an army, it's a mob with rifles and deep personal hate. You probably heard of the Lawrence Massacre, maybe in a footnote. But you ride through it now, the smell of smoke, the screams from buildings, and Jesse, barely 17, watching over 200 civilians get slaughtered by Anderson's men. Some accounts say Jesse took part. Others claim he was still too green. But either way, the trauma stains him like soot on white linen. And while we're here, fringe tidbit time. Did you know Jesse may have first learned to shoot from his mother? Zerelda was no stranger to handling a pistol, and she reportedly kept one under her skirts. Make of that what you will. Back at home, the line between survival and savagery blurs. Union troops raid the Samuel farm again in 1864. This time, they hang Dr. Samuel from a tree, twice, trying to force information out of him. He survives, but never really recovers. Jesse watches all of it. His heart, not just hardened, it's calcified. You can't help but notice, though, there's a pattern forming. Every injustice, real or perceived, piles into Jesse's personal ledger. His idea of morality isn't your Sunday school version. It's a messy, blood-slicked thing, and it's being shaped with every ambush, every insult, every time someone calls him just a boy. He's got his first kill by the time the war ends. Probably more than one. Whether it's a soldier or a civilian, that's still debated, but the real takeaway, Jesse James is already used to killing by 18, and worse. He's starting to enjoy it. The Civil War officially ends in 1865. But not for Jesse. For him, it's merely Act 1. He's tasted what it means to take power into your own hands. He's been applauded for it by fellow Southerners, praised in hushed tones in smoky barns. It's no surprise, then, when he refuses to lay down arms. Instead, Jesse James is about to take all that fury, all that training, and point it straight at the heart of a nation trying to move on. You're not leaving the war. You're just putting on a different kind of uniform, one made of leather, grit, and newspaper clippings. As dusk settles over the Samuel farm, Jesse leans on a fence post, watching the sky turn purple. He's not a boy anymore. He's not a soldier either. But he's something dangerous, something that history's about to remember, whether it wants to or not. You ride with Jesse now, deeper into the brush, no flags, no formations, just snarling horses and sweat-soaked bandanas hiding boys who stopped being boys years ago. The war has come home to Missouri in the worst way possible. Forget Gettysburg and cannons. This is close-up, face-to-face, knife under the ribs warfare. And Jesse, he's thriving. It's 1864. You duck low in the saddle, trailing behind Frank James and the gang they now call the Quantrill Raiders. Well, what's left of them, after the infamous Lawrence massacre? Union retaliation has scattered the group. Now, small units splinter off into even more ruthless factions, one of them led by Bloody Bill Anderson. Guess who joins it? Jesse James, freshly brutalized from yet another Union raid on his family farm, is finally welcomed into the most feared Confederate guerrilla unit in Missouri. Not because he's the best shot, though he's pretty good. Not because he's charismatic, he's not yet, but because he's got something in his eyes. That dead calm, like he's already seen how this ends. And he's fine with it. You're there when they ambush a Union patrol near Centralia. A few dozen soldiers, maybe a little more. The bushwhackers emerge from the trees like ghosts. They wave a white flag at first, dirty trick. The Union soldiers approach to parley. Then the shooting starts. It's over in minutes. 17 men die before they even understand what's happening. But it doesn't stop there. The guerrillas round up the unarmed survivors. Jesse watches, or maybe participates, as they're executed one by one. Some shot in the back of the head, some hacked apart. Then, to drive the horror home, Bloody Bill and his men derail an entire train just to ambush more soldiers. Over 100 Union troops die in the Centralia massacre. It's not a battle, it's a bloodletting. Historians still argue whether Jesse pulled a trigger that day or just stood nearby, soaking it in, but the impact on him is undeniable. From here forward, Jesse doesn't just fight the Union, he hunts it. This isn't about defending Missouri anymore. It's about revenge and practice. See, guerrilla warfare does something to your brain. The sneak attacks, the ambushes, the knowledge that death could come from any bush or tree stump. It rewires you. Jesse becomes obsessed with speed, surprise, and escape. These skills will serve him well later. You crouch beside him one night as he oils his revolver. He's not bragging, he rarely does, but you see a faint smile when Frank tells him he's getting faster. By now, he can draw, aim, and fire in under 2 seconds. The man's practically a prototype for the Hollywood gunslinger, but he bleeds like anyone else. Later that year, he does bleed. Jesse's shot in the chest during a skirmish. The wound's bad. Some say it was a clean musket ball through the lung. Others say it shattered bone. Either way, he barely survives. He's taken to his uncle's home in Harlem, Missouri, where he lies in bed coughing up blood. Day after day, his mother nurses him, and his cousin Zerelda, Z. Mims, yes, same name as his mom. Missouri was weird that way. starts sitting at his bedside. She'll be important later, don't worry. Now here's a quirky fact. During Jesse's recovery, it's rumored he began reading the Bible more. Not out of guilt or repentance, but strategy. He memorized certain verses to quote during robberies, adding a theatrical flair that left witnesses unsettled. "I'm the Lord's vengeance," he'd mutter. Imagine being held up at gunpoint by a man quoting scripture while demanding your gold. But the war is ending. Lee surrenders in April 1865. The Confederacy is collapsing like wet canvas. But Jesse doesn't come in from the cold. No parade, no surrender. He's not interested. Instead, you find yourself riding beside a new kind of man, no longer a soldier. But not quite a bandit either. Just a young killer with a cause that died months ago. And he's not alone. Other ex-bushwhackers linger in Missouri's backcountry. Angry, armed, and alienated. Men like Cole Younger, Jim Reed, and the Shepherd brothers, rough-cut survivors who don't know how to be anything but dangerous. Some of them form gangs, robbing freedmen and carpetbaggers. Others vanish. But Jesse and Frank, they bide their time. Here's where the lines blur. In 1866, Jesse's first confirmed robbery goes down. A bank in Liberty, Missouri, is hit. It's broad daylight. Two men walk in. They shoot the cashier dead. The gang escapes with over $60, an insane sum for the time. Jesse is later accused, but never formally charged. Witnesses say the shooter was a young man, maybe even limping, still healing from his wound. Maybe, but here's the twist. A lot of folks in town cheer. Not for the murder, but for the fact that the bank had northern investors. Carpetbaggers, they say, outsiders getting rich off southern misery. So when the money disappears and no one's caught, well, maybe it's not justice, but it sure feels like payback. That's the part people don't talk about when they romanticize Jesse James. His legend starts here, not with heroism, but with timing. He arrives just when Missouri needs a symbol, and newspapers are happy to oblige. Jesse's name starts slipping into editorials. A letter, signed, Jesse James, appears in a Kansas City paper claiming innocence and denouncing Union oppression. Some say he wrote it. Others think it was forged to stir sympathy. Either way, it works. You hear whispers in church pews, in saloons, even on the train. That Jesse James, he's like Robin Hood. Someone says, never mind that he's keeping the money. Never mind the corpses left behind. He's young, he's southern, and he talks pretty when he wants to. That's enough. By now, Jesse's fully morphing into something new. Not a soldier, not just a criminal, but a persona. A man who knows how to ride a horse fast, shoot even faster, and say just enough to stay famous. He's no longer hiding in the woods. He's walking into town, brushing the dust off his coat, and tipping his hat to the girls. It's barely been a year since the war ended, and already, Jesse James is becoming more than a man. He's becoming a problem. You dust yourself off and look around, same Missouri roads, same crooked fences, but something's shifted. Jesse James isn't just riding with old bushwhackers anymore. Now he's orchestrating his own brand of frontier justice, tailored less for the battlefield and more for headlines. He's not fighting a war now, he's staging one. It's 1866, and Reconstruction is scraping across the South like a rake on stone. Freedmen are gaining rights, carpetbaggers are buying up land, and Union-loyal banks are sprouting like weeds. To Jesse, this isn't peace, it's occupation, and he's not alone in that belief. You feel it every time you pass a neighbor who lowers his voice and uses the word traitor like punctuation. Missouri might be Union by flag, but Jesse sees it as Confederate by soul. That's the grudge he's nursing. And Jesse never forgets a grudge. Frank's still with him, quiet as ever, always a half step behind but never out of sync. They start gathering a group, Cole and Jim Younger, Cleth Miller, the Ford brothers eventually, all ex-guerrillas or roughnecks from broken counties. Their cause, well, that's the thing. It shifts depending on the audience. Some days, they're avenging the South. Other days, They're just robbing banks. You decide which. One of the first real public spectacles comes in 1869. In Gallatin, Missouri, you're walking behind Jesse as he steps into the Daviess County Savings Association. The plan's simple: get in, grab the cash, get out. But this time, Jesse does something different. He shoots the cashier in the face. No warning, no standoff, just a clean shot across the desk. Then, as the man collapses, Jesse calmly announces that he has just killed Major John Sheets, the Union officer responsible for Bloody Bill Anderson's death back in the war. The problem: it wasn't Sheets. The cashier was innocent. But Jesse doesn't care. You see it in his eyes when he turns and walks out. This wasn't about money. This was performance art. Message delivered, whether to the right man or not. Historians still argue whether Jesse truly mistook the man for Sheets or just needed a symbolic kill to escalate his myth. But either way, this moment crystallizes something. Jesse James is no longer pretending to be just another thief. He's staging revenge in broad daylight, with no mask, no apology, and, curiously, a weird sort of pride. You don't run from Gallatin. You saunter. You mount up slowly, almost daring the law to come after you. And when they do, they're already a half day too late. But the repercussions, oh, they're real. Governor Thomas T. Crittenden issues warrants. Rewards start showing up on posters: $3 for Jesse and Frank. The Pinkertons take interest. You think Jesse might lie low. Instead, he writes letters to newspapers, signed with his name. It's the 19th century version of subtweeting the government. And he does it with style. "I am persecuted," he writes in one letter. "I have been hunted like a wild beast." You almost roll your eyes. But the public eats it up. He's playing both sides of the coin: ruthless killer and misunderstood rebel. People in Missouri start naming their dogs after him. One general store even sells little tin revolvers stamped JJ. And while you're distracted by all that, he's still robbing banks. The Columbia heist, the Corydon job, robberies in Kentucky, Iowa, and Kansas. It becomes routine. Jesse walks in, smooth as Sunday morning, shouts a few commands, maybe quotes scripture, takes the money, and vanishes before anyone finishes praying. You get used to the pattern. The getaway horses hidden a mile out. The barn lantern signal. The timing, always mid-afternoon. Always when the sheriff's out of town. It's not just crime anymore. It's choreography. But here's a quirky little aside. Jesse often refuses to rob certain businesses if he learns they're run by widows or Confederate veterans. There's even a tale, possibly apocryphal, that he gave money to a poor farmer after robbing a train. Does that make him a hero? No, but it adds just enough ambiguity to keep people guessing. He cultivates that ambiguity like a rosebush made of barbed wire. Meanwhile, the newspapers, especially those friendly to Southern readers, start painting Jesse as a symbol of resistance. The St. Louis Dispatch, for example, describes him as a man driven to crime by persecution. It's not entirely true, but it's not entirely false either. And that little space between myth and reality, Jesse lives in it. But you're starting to notice something darker. The violence is escalating. The body count is rising. Each robbery leaves at least one person dead now. Sometimes it's a clerk, sometimes a guard. Once, it's a teenager who just happened to be standing too close. Frank pulls Jesse aside one night. You catch only part of the conversation. Words like excessive and heat come up. Jesse doesn't argue, but he doesn't promise anything either. Historians still argue whether Frank was ever fully on board with the gang's more theatrical murders, or whether he stayed only out of brotherly loyalty. But whatever the reason, he's still there. So are you. There's something surreal about it all. You eat cornbread by a campfire one night while Jesse cleans his pistol and recites the names of banks like a grocery list. He doesn't just want to rob them. He wants to make a point each time. A lesson, a scar. And you realize, it's not about war anymore. Not really. It's about legacy. Jesse isn't just fighting back. He's trying to write his name in bullet holes across the Midwest. Then you remember something strange. He's only in his 20s. Younger than you'd expect, but older than anyone should feel. You look at him and wonder if he sleeps. Or if he even dreams. Because now, Jesse James is no longer just seeking revenge. He's manufacturing it. You ride into town with dust on your boots and a story forming behind your eyes. Everywhere you look, Jesse James is already there. On posters. In newspapers. In the whispered conversations between store clerks and stable boys. He's no longer just a man. He's a headline, a tall tale in the making. And you, lucky you, get to see it happen in real time. It's the early 1870s now. And America is healing unevenly. Reconstruction falters. Railroads spread like veins across the land. And the country is caught between mourning and forgetting. Into this uncertain gap rides Jesse James. Guns holstered, hat tilted, and public opinion riding shotgun. You enter a general store in Kansas. The clerk's reading aloud from the latest paper, the Weekly Missouri Sentinel, a story about Jesse and Frank. Painted not as thieves, but as misunderstood warriors. There's talk of Yankee injustice, of Southern dignity, of how Jesse only robs banks with Northern ties. Of course, none of this accounts for the widows and orphans created along the way. But the myth doesn't care about those details. And here's the kicker. Jesse is helping write some of these stories himself. He sends letters to editors, usually dictated, sometimes in his own shaky handwriting, defending his honor, condemning the government, and slipping in just enough charm to make you wonder if he's really as bad as the law claims. His tone, equal parts wounded gentleman and courtroom preacher. I have been hunted like a wolf, he says in one, yet I am no murderer. Historians still argue whether Jesse actually believed his own rhetoric or if he simply knew how to play the game. But either way, it's working. And now you've got dime novels entering the scene. You spot one on a train bench, a cheaply bound book with an illustration of Jesse. Gun raised, saving a young woman from a band of ruthless carpetbaggers. Total fiction. But that doesn't matter, because out here, facts are negotiable, emotions aren't. These books don't just spread the legend, they inflate it. In them, Jesse's a Southern knight, avenging injustice with precise violence and a noble heart. Never mind the facts. Never mind that most of these stories are written by men who've never been west of St. Louis. You chuckle as you read one where Jesse leaps from a moving train onto a galloping horse with a baby in one arm and a pistol in the other. Sounds impressive. Almost makes you forget he once held an entire town hostage during a robbery. Almost. Still, you can't deny it, the myth feels good. Especially if you're from Missouri. Especially if you feel like the war didn't just end, it was lost unfairly. Jesse becomes a proxy for every unavenged wound, every unpunished general, every insult that Reconstruction buried under bureaucracy. Even some churchgoers quietly admire him. He's a sinner, they'll say, but he's our sinner. You catch wind of a story, maybe apocryphal, maybe not, where a pastor reportedly prayed for Jesse during Sunday service. Not for his capture, for his safety, and no one in the congregation complained. Meanwhile, the Pinkertons are getting frustrated. Alan Pinkerton, founder of the infamous detective agency, takes Jesse personally. This isn't just another wanted man, this is a taunt. And Pinkerton does not enjoy being taunted. So, he sends his agents to Missouri. You feel the airshift. The Pinkertons are ex-Union spies. Hardened men in long coats who show up in the middle of the night asking pointed questions. And when that doesn't work, they break doors, burn barns, terrorize neighbors. It's legal-ish, maybe, and wildly counterproductive. Here's the fringe tidbit. One Pinkerton agent reportedly disguised himself as a mail carrier and tried to sneak into the James farm disguised as a cousin. He didn't make it past lunch. The locals recognized him and chased him 2 counties over with pitchforks and squirrel rifles. He limped back north and never returned. But the most infamous Pinkerton moment. That happens in 1875. You're huddled in the shadows outside the James farmhouse. January wind cutting through your coat. A Pinkerton posse has surrounded the property. They throw an incendiary device, some call it a flare. Others say it was a homemade bomb, through the window. The explosion kills Jesse's young half-brother Archie, just 9 years old, and maims his mother Zerelda, blowing off part of her arm. The public's reaction: outrage. Even people who hated Jesse find this indefensible. You watch the legend grow even bigger, now stained with martyrdom. Jesse isn't just a rebel now, he's the son of a maimed mother, the brother of a murdered child. Sympathy floods the newspapers. Editorials decry the Pinkertons, and Jesse leans into it hard. From the ashes of that farmhouse rises something terrifyingly effective: the outlaw as victim. A vigilante with a cause. It's marketing genius, intentional or not, and it makes him even harder to catch. You ride into a nearby town a week later and find Jesse's name being spoken like a ghost story and a prayer all in one. Schoolchildren know his exploits better than their spelling words. A barber in Jefferson City claims Jesse once spared him during a robbery. A baker in Columbia swears she sold him a cherry pie the day before a heist. Everybody wants a piece of the legend, even if they have to invent it. Historians still argue whether this cultural embrace of Jesse was a mass delusion, a form of Southern nostalgia, or just the earliest case study in celebrity criminal branding. But you're living through it, and it feels unstoppable. Meanwhile, Jesse keeps robbing banks, stagecoaches, the occasional unlucky payroll train. He moves in circles now, Missouri to Kansas, over to Tennessee, then back again. The gang fluctuates in size and loyalty. Some members drop out, others die. A few, like the Youngers, will stay with him through thick and gunfire. You notice Jesse doesn't stay in one place long. He's learned to disguise his voice, to alter his posture. He switches horses like shirts, changes aliases like socks. But no matter where he goes, he's always 2 steps ahead and one newspaper article deeper into folklore. You think about how he's barely 30. You think about how he'll never see 40. But for now, Jesse James is a legend in motion, galloping full speed through a nation that isn't sure whether to hang him or hail him. And you're riding right beside him. You wake to gunshots, not real ones, echoes in your dreams, stitched into the back of your skull after too many nights on the trail with Jesse and the boys. This is your life now: horses that barely rest, faces that never smile, and fingers that always twitch near a trigger. Because with every heist, every getaway, the odds of dying like a legend or just plain dying get tighter. You're heading toward Liberty, Missouri again, though Liberty has nothing to do with it. The James Younger gang, now your inner circle, has been working at a near mythical pace. Bank jobs, payroll snatchers, and close calls stack up like cordwood. You see the patterns. They case a town in daylight, usually a few days in advance. 1 or 2 men walk into the bank and ask about deposits or open an account. They smile, they nod, they leave. The next day, it's guns out, masks up, and money in the saddlebags. But not all of them go smooth. You remember the job in Corydon, Iowa, early 1870s. Jesse shoots a bank manager who doesn't move fast enough. The crowd outside hears the gunshot. A group of townsfolk, mostly shopkeepers, starts firing back. The gang escapes, but not before one of your horses catches a bullet. Jesse's furious, not at the townspeople, at the horse. He hesitated. Jesse mutters. You know he's talking about the moment the horse stumbled. But you also wonder if he's talking about himself. The violence is getting sloppier, messier, and Jesse, he's getting twitchier. He watches every face too long, checks his own shadow for movement. You've seen him wake up in the middle of the night and point a revolver at the moon, convinced someone's out there. Still, when the next job comes up, he's first in line. This one, train robbery, Clay County, July 1873. You ride with Jesse and Frank as they target the Chicago, Rock Island and Pacific Railroad near Adair, Iowa. It's a big one, and Jesse's giddy, in his quiet, coiled snake way. You don't just rob a train. You plan it like a theater production. You ride ahead a day early, loosen the tracks with hammers, Tie them with wire so the derailment hits just right, off a small embankment. The train barrels through at midnight and hits the trap perfectly. The engine flips. The cars crumple like tin. The noise is thunder and steel and screaming. You dash into the wreckage with pistols drawn. Jesse's yelling commands. Frank covers the rear. The gang moves fast, clearing safes, rifling through satchels. One guard dies in the crash. Another is shot trying to intervene. The gang escapes with over $3, modest by their standards. But this isn't about the cash. This is the first time a moving train has ever been robbed in the United States. Mainstream historical fact. Right there. You were part of it. Congratulations. Or condolences. Jesse doesn't celebrate. He writes another letter. He blames the death on the railroad company. Accuses them of endangering passengers by refusing to listen to warnings. He signs it like a poet with a gun. Yours truly. Jesse James. The newspapers eat it up. The headline the next morning might as well be a standing ovation. The American Robin Hood strikes again. But here's the thing you notice, more lawmen are showing up now. Local sheriffs used to look the other way. Now they stare. Deputies used to offer vague directions. Now they form posses. Someone's turned up the heat. And you're not sure if Jesse can tell the difference between admiration and a noose. A quirky tidbit for you. Jesse reportedly once bribed a newspaper editor with a stack of silver to make sure a certain photo never saw print. It showed him slumped at a bar, drunk, looking tired and, God forbid, ordinary. Legend doesn't permit exhaustion, it demands polish. So the photo vanished. Jesse didn't. You camp outside Topeka one night. Jesse's quiet, staring at the stars like they owe him something. Frank is sharpening a knife. Cole Younger's humming an old hymn. You can't help thinking about how close everything's getting. Not just the jobs, the risks, the stares. You feel it tightening, like someone's drawing strings around the gang, cinching them tighter with each robbery. And then comes Huntington, West Virginia, September 1875. You hit the bank just before closing. It goes south. Fast. The alarm bell rings too early. A customer fights back. Jesse shoots him. Frank grabs the cash. You run through an alley and almost trip over a patrolman. You shoot first. It's muscle memory now. Back in Missouri, the newspapers aren't so romantic anymore. The headlines start shifting. Gang brings bloodshed to Eastern Town. Jesse James kills again. The myth's still there, but the shine is dulling. The blood soaking through too fast for the ink to keep up. Historians still argue whether this marks the beginning of the end. You can't say, but you remember how, that night after Huntington, Jesse doesn't say a word. Just stares into the fire, picks up a burning stick, and draws circles in the dirt until his fingertips blister. The gang keeps moving, always moving. Farmhouses, haylofts, sympathetic innkeepers, cousins who say they'll never talk but eventually do. Your world is narrowed to miles and miles of bad roads, half-decent stew, and gun oil. One evening, as you're cleaning your pistol, you overhear Jesse mutter something to Frank. We're not robbing anymore, we're provoking. You're not sure if it's a joke or a confession. But it's true. Every heist now is a spark thrown at dry timber. The law's more aggressive, the press more skeptical, the people more afraid. And Jesse, he's riding faster, sleeping less, trusting no one. He's not just a man on the run. He's a fuse. You crouch behind a boulder in the dead of night, heart hammering like it's trying to escape your ribs. Behind you, Jesse mutters a curse. Not because he's scared, he doesn't scare easily, but because the train is late. Again, you're perched above the Rock Island line near Otterville, Missouri, and this one's meant to be legendary. The gang has done trains before. You remember Adair. You remember the twisted wreckage, the smell of hot steel and oil. But this one's different. This is about control, precision. No derailment this time, just a simple, direct, in and out robbery. Elegant, in theory. Jesse's idea of artistry, and then you hear it, the low thunder of wheels and steam. The train rounds the bend, chugging obediently into the trap. You and the others move fast. You wave a lantern on the track, signaling danger ahead. The engineer slows, confused. That's when you board. Guns out, faces covered. You've rehearsed the timing like a stage performance. Frank heads to the engine. You're with Jesse as he kicks open the express car. Inside, wide-eyed clerks drop their ledgers and raise their hands. Jesse's voice is calm, almost polite. "Gentlemen, this ain't personal. Kindly hand over what's not yours." There's no screaming, not yet. You unload the safe, several thousand in gold, bonds, and cash. Not bad for 10 minutes work. Jesse leaves behind a note, scrawled on the back of a shipping manifest. "Compliments of the James gang. Tell your bosses we'll be back." You're gone before anyone can form a sentence. By the time the law arrives, you're already miles away, swapping horses, splitting the take, hiding in a barn you scoped 3 nights earlier. It's clockwork. But here's the weird part. No one's angry. The newspapers report the robbery with a mix of horror and admiration. One headline literally reads, "Polite bandits strike again." They highlight how no passengers were harmed, how the conductor was allowed to keep his watch, how the clerks weren't even tied up. It's as if Jesse's carving out a moral code right there in the smoke and iron. Historians still argue whether Jesse had a true code, or if it was all theatrics. But you've seen him wave off extra gold if it meant sparing a family. And you've also seen him shoot a man for spitting too close. So, your guess is as good as anyone's. One fringe detail that rarely makes the history books. Jesse reportedly once gave a young passenger a silver dollar after a robbery and told him, "Buy yourself something that won't rust." The boy kept that coin until he died. It's now in a museum, allegedly, or at least, a silver dollar claiming to be that one is. Back on the trail, things are changing. The gang is more structured now. Jesse issues orders like a general. Frank handles logistics. Cole Younger tracks timing and distance between safe houses. It's efficient, cold, and, for now, unstoppable. But it's also starting to feel corporate. You see Jesse meeting with strange men in back rooms, politicians, landowners, disgruntled former Confederates. There's talk of protection money, of leveraging Jesse's fame for Southern influence. You don't know if he understands what they're doing. But you do know this: Jesse's image is no longer entirely his own. There's talk, too, of how he's funding former guerrilla groups, men trying to push back against Reconstruction governments. Some even claim he's on a political mission. Others say that's just smoke to keep folks sympathetic. Either way, the robberies keep happening, and Jesse's name keeps selling papers. He's on fire now, figuratively, though you're pretty sure he's been near some literal ones too. Trains in Iowa, Kentucky, Texas. The gang grows and shrinks like a lung. New faces cycle in. Some stay, some vanish, some get killed. The law can't keep up. But the Pinkertons are still trying. They switch tactics, less brute force, more subtlety, bribed informants, surveillance, reward money triples. The James brothers are declared public enemies. You hear rumors that the governor wants them hanged before the next election. The pressure's mounting, but Jesse, he just robs another train. And now you start noticing the double life. Jesse doesn't sleep in ditches every night. Sometimes he's in a nice farmhouse, wearing a tie, holding his infant son. Sometimes he's in a church pew with his wife. Yes, the cousin he courted during his war injury days. They married in 1874. She's quiet, composed, and fiercely loyal, maybe too loyal. You've seen Jesse switch from outlaw to neighbor in seconds. He'll rob a train one day, then attend a community picnic the next. It's surreal. He's got aliases now. Thomas Howard is his favorite. You've helped him forge the papers yourself. He moves his family frequently, always one step ahead of suspicion. And the public still loves him. Children ask for Jesse stories before bed. A traveling stage show features a dramatization of the James gang that plays to sold-out crowds. Jesse once joked that if he charged royalties, he'd be richer than any bank he's robbed. But here's the thing no one says out loud: the gang's starting to fray. Cole Younger is growing impatient with Jesse's impulsiveness. Frank looks tired all the time. There's tension in every campfire conversation now. Nobody says it, but you all know. The train robberies are getting riskier. Lawmen are more aggressive. And Jesse, he's pushing harder, faster, like he knows something's catching up. You're in Arkansas now, lying low after another job. Jesse's pacing, talking to himself, quoting scripture again, something about vengeance and wolves. You ask him if he ever thinks of quitting. He looks at you like you asked him to grow wings. I don't quit, he says. I just finish things. That's Jesse James. Hero to some, nightmare to others. And to you, he's a storm pretending to be a man. You open the saloon door and the smell hits first, old tobacco. Warm sweat. And that sticky sweet rot of spilled whiskey no one's bothered to mop up. A couple of tired piano notes drift from the back. But what grabs your attention is the crowd gathered around a newspaper. Eyes wide, fingers pointing at the front page like it's a sermon. There he is again, Jesse James. Hat cocked, revolver raised, riding a train in full gallop straight through the American imagination. You squeeze between two ranches and take a look. It's a woodcut illustration, exaggerated. Sure, but the story, that's real enough. Another robbery, another narrow escape, another flourish from Jesse left at the scene. This time a polite note tucked into a conductor's vest pocket. The article calls him, the people's outlaw. You can't help but smile. Jesse's not just robbing banks anymore. He's robbing attention, admiration, even identity. He's everywhere. Pinned up in barbershops, whispered about in boarding houses, debated in drawing rooms. Even folks who've never been west of Pennsylvania swear they knew someone who once saw him. But the image, that's no accident. It's being sculpted, smoothed, polished, and sold. By the 1870s, newspapers have figured out that Jesse sells, especially in the South, where old Confederates still nurse their bitterness like aged bourbon. Jesse isn't just a criminal in those stories, he's a folk hero. A gentleman rebel, the last breath of the Old South refusing to be silenced. Even the New York press gets in on the act, flipping between outrage and weird fascination. You sit down with a copy of the Kansas City Times, edited by John Newman Edwards, a Confederate veteran who's practically Jesse's ghostwriter. Edwards doesn't just report on Jesse, he elevates him. He crafts stories that drip with sentiment, brushing aside the blood and focusing on the nobility, the suffering, the righteousness. And Jesse, he eats it up. He sends letters to Edwards, some dictated, some probably forged, who knows, and Edwards prints them verbatim. It's a symbiotic relationship. Jesse gets a mouthpiece, and Edwards gets a legend to lean on. Together, they craft the Jesse James that the people want, dangerous. Yes, but principled, violent, but poetic, a rebel with a fast draw and a bruised heart. Historians still argue whether Jesse truly believed the myth Edwards created, or whether he simply used it like a disguise stitched from paper and ink. Either way, the result is the same. Jesse James becomes a brand. And that brand, it's lucrative. You see it firsthand. A traveling minstrel show performs a dramatized Jesse James robbery spectacular. One town even builds a fake James hideout as a tourist attraction. Never mind that Jesse's never been within 50 miles of it. People pay admission just the same. Meanwhile, the real Jesse is living under aliases, bouncing between farmhouses, raising children, and occasionally robbing trains in the off hours like a man with too many hobbies. He's got a foot in two worlds, outlaw and icon. And you're standing right in the middle, wondering how long he can balance. One quirky tidbit from this era: Jesse reportedly sent a bouquet of flowers to a librarian in Kansas City who called him a literary villain. She was flattered. The note read, "For your honesty, not your opinion. He's dangerous, yes, but he's also charming, calculated, and, increasingly, delusional." You start to sense it around the campfire. Jesse talks about himself in the third person now. Sometimes when he's had too much to drink, they'll write about Jesse James for 100 years. He says one night, staring into the flames, You don't doubt it. You just wonder what version they'll tell. But for every fan, there's a critic. You pass through a northern town, Illinois, maybe, and find newspapers that describe Jesse as a terrorist, a glorified murderer cloaked in southern nostalgia. Some even compare him to a pirate. Nothing romantic about a man who shoots bank clerks in the face. One editor writes, "You don't disagree, you just don't say it out loud." Still, Jesse's defenders are louder, and more organized. The Lost Cause narrative is gaining steam. Southern pride movements, Confederate memorial associations, and post-war veterans clubs all start embracing Jesse like he's a war monument with a heartbeat. They speak of him like a symbol of resistance, of defiance, of that old-world chivalry that's mostly myth, but still sells well on cotton flags and gravestone speeches. You sit in a parlor one night, listening to a retired colonel argue that Jesse James preserved the honor of the Confederacy longer than any general ever did. No one corrects him, not even you. And Jesse, he keeps feeding the machine. He's writing more letters, signing more names, even posing for the occasional photo. Carefully staged, always armed, always calm. You look at those eyes and wonder what's going on behind them. He's always watching, always calculating, because even now, Jesse's more than a man. He's a message. And you start to see the problem with messages. They're easier to worship than to understand. People start projecting their hopes and fears onto Jesse like he's a canvas. Poor farmers see a man who robs the rich. Old Confederates see a warrior unbroken. Romantics see a rogue. Critics see a menace. And Jesse, he sees all of it. And he plays it like a banjo. But beneath all the fanfare and headlines, you catch glimpses of the real man slipping through. The nights he sits quiet, staring too long into the fire. The sudden rages. The loyalty that flips into paranoia when someone speaks too slow. You realize something chilling. Jesse James isn't playing the role anymore. He's become it. You feel it first in your stomach. Like the air's too thin to breathe. Jesse's eyes scan the tree line. His hand never straying far from the pistol at his side. Not because a job's about to go down. Those are planned. This is worse. This is Jesse off guard. And lately, that's happening more often. You're hiding out near Nashville now. Jesse's brought the family along. Still pretending to be Thomas Howard, a quiet horse trader with a wife, 2 kids, and an aversion to nosy neighbors. The farm's modest, the walls thin, but you still hear him pacing at night, muttering about traitors and shadows that don't belong. The problem isn't the law anymore. It's everyone else. You feel it when you pass a man on the road and Jesse doesn't return the nod. Just stares. You feel it when one of the new recruits, a jittery kid from Kansas, laughs too loud at a story about the Gallatin robbery. And Jesse's face goes tight. Not angry, worse, cold. The gang isn't what it was. Loyalty's thinning, trust, practically extinct. And the Pinkertons, oh, they're still there. They've just changed tactics again. They're offering money now, lots of it. Posters line the walls of every town you pass. $10 for Jesse James. Dead or alive. That's not just a bounty anymore. That's a business opportunity, and Jesse knows it. You watch him recount his own crew one night. Like inventory, he's quiet, nodding. He doesn't say the word. But you feel it in your bones. Someone in this circle will sell him out. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Historians still argue whether Jesse ever truly trusted anyone after 1875. But from here, riding at his side, you know better. He didn't, he couldn't. The paranoia grows roots. Jesse starts testing people, asking them for small favors, checking if they repeat it later, changing meeting points last minute, swapping horses mid-ride. He even fakes a robbery once, just to see who talks. 2 men disappear after that. And here's a quirky little detail from the dark side of Jesse's fame. He sometimes forced new gang members to listen to his own press clippings read aloud around the campfire, so they understand who they're riding with. He'd say, or maybe so he could remember who he's pretending to be. Meanwhile, every job gets harder. You remember a stagecoach hit near Hot Springs. The driver swerves. A passenger grabs a pistol. Chaos erupts. Bullets fly before you're even out of the brush. Jesse shoots a woman in the shoulder by accident. Doesn't say a word about it afterward. Just takes the money, mounts up, and rides. He's not robbing for style anymore. He's robbing to stay ahead. And yet, the papers still love him. They haven't caught up with the change. They're still writing Jesse James as if it's 1873. Still using phrases like rebellious gentleman and southern rogue. You watch Jesse read one of those headlines and give a hollow laugh. They think I'm still that boy with the saddlebag full of justice. He says, "I'm just trying not to get shot in my sleep." You believe him. Because now, every shadow looks like a threat. Every loud knock makes him flinch. He checks windows twice, bolts the doors, tells Z not to let the kids outside without his say-so. And the bounty hunters, they're not amateurs anymore. One posse nearly catches up with you outside Russellville. You hear the shots, see the smoke, smell the burn of close powder. A young deputy dies. So does one of your own, Tom Shepard. Shot through the chest. Jesse doesn't stop, doesn't even look back, just tells you to keep moving. That's when it hits you. Jesse used to fight for revenge. Then fame. Then defiance. But now he's just fighting to exist. And when you're fighting just to stay alive, trust becomes too expensive. You stop at a farmhouse owned by a family friend. Jesse thanks the man, eats his food, drinks his whiskey, and never takes his hand off the pistol in his lap. As you leave, you hear him mutter, "Too kind. He'll sell me in a week." Later that night, you ask him what he'd do if someone turned him in. He doesn't answer. He just asks you what you'd do with $10,000. The silence stretches. That's the thing about paranoia, it's contagious. You start eyeing the others, wondering who's writing letters to Pinkertons under fake names. Who's pocketing a little too much from the last job? Who's falling behind on purpose to let the posse catch up? It's not a gang anymore. It's a countdown. And yet, Jesse keeps pushing. Another train, another bank, another signature scribbled in haste. He insists on signing the notes now, like an artist refusing to leave his canvas unnamed. But there's something frantic about it, like a man writing his own obituary in real time. Historians still debate when Jesse realized the end was coming. But riding with him now, you don't need scholars. You see it in his posture, in the way he checks his reflection in windows, in the way he touches his holster before he speaks. Like punctuation. And all the while, the Pinkertons watch. They wait. Not for a shootout, not for a chase, for a crack. Because they know the truth. Jesse James will not be killed in a blaze of glory. He will be betrayed. You wake before dawn, and Jesse's already dressed, shirt tucked, hair slicked, gun belt cinched. He sits at the edge of the bed in the half-light, staring at the floor like it just insulted him. You don't say anything. You've learned by now, when Jesse's quiet, it's not from peace, it's from calculation. Outside, the world feels hushed, almost reverent. Birds chirp softly in the hedges. A light breeze whispers through the shutters. It could almost be a normal morning, if not for the way Jesse scans the tree line 3 times before letting his children out the door. This is life now. Jesse the father, Jesse the husband, Jesse the hunted. He's trying to be normal, or at least the closest version of normal a man like him can manage. You're in Tennessee now, under the Thomas Howard alias again, living on rented farmland outside Nashville. Folks around here think he's a quiet businessman, even throws the occasional coin in the church plate, helps the neighbors with their harvest, smiles when he needs to. But you've seen the cracks. He never turns his back on a room. He leaves doors ajar so he can listen better. At night, he whispers to Z about places they might move next. Kentucky, maybe Texas again, somewhere quieter, somewhere no one knows Jesse James ever existed. Z listens. She always does. But her eyes are tired. Not sad. Just resigned. You can tell she's heard this all before. One of the saddest things you'll ever see is a man with a family who no longer believes he can keep them safe, but keeps trying anyway. Jesse wants peace. Or says he does. But peace, for a man like him, is just a story he tells himself between robberies. And the jobs, they're still happening, just smaller now, more desperate. He's down to a handful of men. Most of the old crew's dead, imprisoned, or turned. The younger brothers are locked up. Frank's still loyal, but distant. He spends more time with his own family these days. Writing letters, reading Shakespeare again. Jesse doesn't say it, but you can feel it. Even Frank is slipping away. So Jesse starts pulling in new blood. And that's where the trouble really begins. You meet Robert and Charlie Ford in late 1881. Brothers, slick, eager, and just a little too curious. Bob, the younger one, is especially sharp, not with a gun. He's no quick draw, but with his eyes. He watches Jesse the way a cat watches a mouse and pretends it's admiration. Jesse likes them, or pretends to. Maybe he's just out of options. The truth is, Jesse doesn't trust anyone anymore. He simply tolerates them in shorter and shorter bursts. But here's what eats at him. The legend is still alive. But the money is running thin. Each job barely keeps the family afloat. The spoils are smaller, the risks bigger, and the law, they're not chasing him anymore. They're waiting for him. He knows that. He moves like a man already caught. You're sitting with him one evening, playing cards in the parlor. The Ford brothers are there too. Jesse deals the hand slow. Real slow, like he's thinking about more than just the cards. Then he looks up at Bob. Sharp-eyed. You ever think about how people'll talk about you when you're gone? Jesse asks. Bob fumbles his answer. Something vague, something forgettable. Jesse doesn't blink. They'll lie, he says, almost to himself. They always lie. You don't know if it's a warning or a confession. Historians still argue whether Jesse suspected Bob Ford that early. But there's no denying it. The Fords were already talking to the governor. They'd met with Thomas Crittenden in secret, trading Jesse's location for a full pardon and a share of the bounty. And Jesse, he'd brought them into his home, into the farmhouse, into his family. It's cruel irony, but then again, maybe it's just the logical end for a man who trusted no one and taught others to do the same. Here's a quirky detail. Jesse had developed a habit of humming hymns when he cleaned his pistols. Not loudly, just a soft, tuneless murmur under his breath. Bob once asked what the song was, and Jesse said, "Something my mother sang when she buried my father." Then he grinned. She had a good aim, too. You laugh. Awkwardly. Bob doesn't. Back at the farm, Z is folding laundry, and Jesse is watching the children play. He's restless. He keeps talking about leaving Missouri for good. California maybe, somewhere with oranges and ocean air. It sounds nice. He even sends Frank a letter about it. Frank never replies. And the Ford brothers, they're still there, still helping with chores, still pretending to be loyal. You want to believe Jesse doesn't know. But maybe he does. Maybe that's why he starts giving away his things. A pistol to a neighbor. A silver coin to a child. He even gives his favorite horse to a local farmer, just in case it's needed more elsewhere. Z asks about it once. He shrugs. Can't take it all with me. He says. You can't tell if he's planning a departure or a funeral. He doesn't cry, doesn't rage. Jesse James just grows quiet. Tired. The farmhouse grows quieter too. No more campfire stories. No more long rides into town. Just the soft creak of wood and the distant rattle of wind through bare trees. And Jesse, he starts locking the doors, from the inside. You watch Jesse rock his baby daughter on the front porch. The chair creaking gently under him as the breeze moves through the Tennessee grass. His voice is low, some hymn from his mother's side. Maybe, but the baby stirs. Calm, it's almost too peaceful, like the stillness before thunder. Because Jesse James might be holding a child. But he still keeps one eye on the tree line and one hand resting near his revolver. Domesticity doesn't come easy to a man who's spent half his life fleeing the law and the other half being chased by his own shadow. You've seen him cradle a rifle while mending a fence. You've watched him check the locks 3 times before letting Z light the stove. Peace, here, is performance. One that Jesse repeats daily in hopes that eventually, it might become real. But deep down, you know, and he knows, it never will. Life at the Howard farm is a strange mix of cozy routines and creeping dread. The children play in the yard. Jessie tends to livestock. Z bakes bread and hums softly as she works. But Jesse's always on edge. He listens for hooves. He notices strange footprints. He goes pale every time a letter arrives. Even if it's from a cousin. You start to notice how he watches people when they talk. Not just listens, watches. Like he's reading lips for lies. Like he's counting every breath. Even around family, Jesse never truly uncoils. One evening, you see him sit in silence for nearly half an hour after hearing a rooster crow at the wrong time. That's what paranoia does. It robs you of the little comforts, turning even a chicken into a spy. And yet, Jesse is still trying to play the part of a normal man. He kisses Z's hand after dinner, reads bedtime stories in a low, scratchy voice. One night, he even builds a kite for his son. You'd think it was sweet, if he hadn't also made the string extra long, in case someone needs to cut and run. Frank's not around much anymore. He's trying to start fresh in Virginia with his wife and kids. Writing poetry again. Farming. He sends a letter now and then. Jesse reads them, smiles faintly, but never replies. Maybe he can't. Maybe he's afraid that even his words might betray him. Historians still argue whether Jesse truly wanted out of the outlaw life, or whether he just wanted to change the rules. But you know the truth is messier. He wanted both. He wanted the silence of farm life and the roar of legend. A soft bed and a loaded Colt on the nightstand. And that's a balance no man can keep forever. The Ford brothers are still here, slinking around the edges like loose floorboards that never quite settle. Bob tries to act loyal, but you see the cracks. His eyes dart too quickly. His compliments land too heavy. And Jesse's too smart to miss it. Still, Jesse keeps them close. Too close. He brings Bob into town sometimes. Has him help mend fences. Even leaves him alone with his kids. It's either trust, or a test. Or maybe Jesse is so tired he's willing to gamble on the illusion of loyalty just to feel something like peace. Here's a fringe fact for you. Jesse was known to sew his own buttons. Not because he liked it, but because he didn't trust tailors. Said they could hide needles or slip poison into the seams. So at night, by the oil lamp, he'd sit quietly threading needle through cloth, patching shirts that might never be worn twice. He told you once, a bullet tears through silk same as denim. Just looks fancier on the way in. The truth is, Jesse's world is shrinking. He used to ride across states. Now he barely leaves the property. He used to command gangs. Now he's got two young men with nervous smiles and whispery voices watching him from across the room. You see it in his posture, more slumped now. In his sighs, deeper, heavier. You catch him talking to himself. Sometimes rehearsing old lines. Sometimes whispering names from years ago. Gallatin, Pinkerton, Lawrence, Frank. You find him one afternoon kneeling by a tree stump, burying a small tin box. Just keepsakes, he says. You don't ask. You don't want to know what kind of keepsakes a man like Jesse James buries. That night, he tells you something strange. If I died today, I wonder what they'd put in the paper. Outlaw downed in shootout. Villain meets his end. Or maybe, family man. Misunderstood. You shrug. I think they'd say whatever sells best. He laughs, just once. Dry and bitter, and then goes quiet again. You notice him less confident now. Not in his aim, he's still fast, but in his decisions. He hesitates more, glances around before opening the barn, waits an extra beat before handing you a task. He trusts his own instincts, but barely. And Z, she's still here, still loving, still kind, but even she has the tired look of someone who's realized she married a hurricane and can't tell when the next strike will hit. She once told you, quietly, as she washed the dinner plates. He sleeps with his boots on now. Not because he has to. Because he doesn't think he deserves to take them off. The bounty posters get updated again. Bigger font. Sharper drawings. Clearer terms, $10. Dead or alive. The townsfolk start whispering more boldly. Even his friends start locking the doors. Jesse isn't just famous anymore. He's a liability, and deep down, he knows it. You're on the road to Northfield now, Minnesota, far from the dusty fields of Missouri, far from sympathetic townsfolk and blind sheriffs. This is unfamiliar territory, cold, stiff, and northern in all the wrong ways. And Jesse, he's tense, his jaws locked, his fingers drum the saddle horn, and he hasn't cracked a joke in 3 states. The James Younger gang's grown thin, ragged. Frank's here, Cole, Bob, and Jim Younger too. Cleth Miller, Bill Chadwell, 8 riders in all, but something's off from the start. Too many eyes on them. Too many questions when they stop for supplies. No friendly nods, no fake names that stick, just silence and suspicion. Jesse doesn't like it, but he pushes forward anyway. The target is the First National Bank of Northfield. A big one, the kind of hit that could set them all up for a long time, or at least get them out of this financial crawl space they've fallen into. Jesse needs a win, maybe even one last one. But this job isn't like the others. You arrive on September 7th. 1876. The gang splits, some wait outside the bank. The others go in. Jesse and Bob Younger lead the charge. Inside, the clerk behind the counter is already nervous. He knows something's wrong. He refuses to open the safe. Claims it's on a timer. Jesse points his gun at his face and tells him to try harder. Then, like thunder breaking a curtain, the townsfolk strike. Outside, Cleth Miller and Bill Chadwell try to control the street. But this is Minnesota, not Missouri. The people here, they don't run, they fight. One shopkeeper has a shotgun behind his counter. A dentist fires from an upstairs window. A crowd swells, armed with rifles, pistols, even rocks. They pour into the street like a flood of muscle and rage. You're pinned behind a barrel. You hear Cleth scream. He's hit in the chest. Twice. Then Bill goes down with a bullet through the neck. You glance up just in time to see Frank pulling Jesse out the front door. Blood streaking his coat. Guns still smoking. The job's gone sideways. Completely. Historians still argue whether it was arrogance or desperation that brought Jesse here. Whether the gang underestimated Northfield or overestimated their own legend. But either way, the results are undeniable. A total disaster. The gang flees in chaos. Shots ringing through the town square. 2 civilians dead. 2 gang members dead. 3 more critically wounded. The take, barely $26 in spare coins. The worst heist in Jesse's career. And now it's a race. You spend the next 2 weeks on horseback. Bleeding through your boots. Sleeping under bushes. Your gut twisted into a permanent knot. The manhunts are relentless. Bloodhounds. Posses, even bounty hunters on borrowed horses. The gang breaks apart, desperate to lose the trail. Cole Younger's hit in the hip. Jim's bleeding from the arm. Bob's face is torn open by buckshot. Frank and Jesse are the only ones who stay clear. Somehow, it's like they've had practice. Well, they have. Years of it. Jesse rides with cold precision. But his eyes are different now. Not angry, not even scared. Just hollow. You hear the gunfire when the Youngers are caught near Madelia, Minnesota. A final standoff. Cole, Bob, and Jim are captured. Half dead. Their faces are barely recognizable. You catch a whisper from one of the papers. They beg to be shot. Instead, they're sentenced to life in Stillwater prison. You and Jesse keep moving. Days blur into nights, then back again. Jesse talks less, eats less. At one point, you ride past a small river and he stops to stare at his reflection for a full minute before muttering, "I should have stayed in Clay County." That's the thing about the Northfield raid. It doesn't just kill men. It kills the gang. There's no coming back from it. Not in full. The James Younger gang is broken. The legend cracked. And while the papers still try to spin it into frontier drama, the truth bleeds through the ink. Jesse James lost. And he knows it. You lay low in Tennessee again. Back under the name Thomas Howard. Jesse's got a limp now. Won't say how he got it. Probably a fall during the escape. But he pretends he's always walked like that. The fire's gone from his voice. Even his paranoia's quieter now. Not less. Just buried deeper. But he still won't stop. One night, around the fire, you ask him why. Why not just run? Take the family west. Disappear. No more banks. No more death. He looks at you like you asked him to swallow his own teeth. Because I ain't dead yet, he says. And that's it. That's Jesse's reason for everything. Because he isn't dead. Here's a quirky little footnote from the fallout. Someone in Minnesota started selling Northfield Hero pins, little tin badges handed out to residents who claimed to have fired at Jesse's gang. By winter, over 200 people owned one. Either Northfield had the world's best aim, or people just love a good story. And Jesse, he's no longer the story everyone roots for. The headlines shift. Less Robin Hood, more wanted man, less clever, more reckless. The Pinkertons double their offers. Governors start using Jesse's name in speeches again, but now as a threat. We will rid this state of Jesse James and all who protect him. And Jesse, he just keeps riding. But now, it's not about riches. It's about not dying quietly. You wake up to the sound of a rooster. Same as any other morning on the Howard farm. But something's changed. Jesse's not in the kitchen. Z is stirring porridge with a tight jaw. Eyes flicking toward the front window like she's bracing for an argument that hasn't happened yet. The sun's barely up, but the tension, it's already wide awake. Jesse's in the barn, saddling a horse he's got no plans to ride. Not today. You know the look. Restless. Clenched. Like his skin no longer fits right. He's been this way since Northfield. It's been years, but in Jesse's world, old wounds never close, they just learn how to walk. He's alone now, for the most part. Frank is gone, officially retired. After Northfield, he went east, took up a quiet life and even testified in court once to clear his own name. Jesse took that hard. He never said it, but you saw it in his posture, like his spine lost its last supporting beam. He'd tell anyone who asked. Frank's got his reasons. Then he'd spit and walk off. You're still in Missouri, but Jesse treats it like a foreign country. He doesn't ride like he used to. No more sweeping heists or coordinated hits. Just small scores, one-man jobs. 2 if he brings Bob Ford along. Stagecoaches, payrolls, the occasional rich merchant heading west. The money's thinner, the risk isn't. You accompany him on one of those. Cold spring morning, a dusty road, a small carriage. Jesse stops it with the usual flair, hat low, pistol raised, voice calm. The man inside gives up the cash without a fight. Even tips his hat in that strange mixture of fear and recognition that Jesse inspires. Afterward, you ask, was it worth it? Jesse shrugs, pays for oats. That's where he's at now. Robbing for groceries. Historians still argue whether these late career jobs were desperation or obsession. Was Jesse addicted to the life? Or just too tangled in it to crawl out? Watching him now, you figure it's both. The legend won't feed his kids. But it's the only thing keeping him from vanishing completely. He starts using aliases more frequently. Thomas Howard is still the favorite. But sometimes he answers to Mr. Davis. Sometimes, Mr. Nichols. You're not sure if it's strategy or if he just forgets who he's supposed to be that day. There's a certain sadness to it all. You catch Jesse in the mirror one night, adjusting his shirt collar. He pauses, frowns, and mutters. You ever look at yourself and wonder if you're still in there? He doesn't wait for an answer. His relationship with Z is strained. She loves him, always has. But it's like living with a storm cloud that occasionally hums lullabies to the kids. She begs him to stop, to walk away, to take the family west like he used to dream. But Jesse shakes his head. You can't outrun the devil when you're riding his horse. That's about as close to introspection as he ever gets. He moves homes again, rents cheaper, the neighbors more distant. Jesse doesn't like people anymore. Not because he's mean, but because he can't tell who's thinking about that reward poster when they shake his hand. Bob Ford's still around, always nearby, Always trying too hard. Jesse keeps him close. Maybe because he's young. Maybe because he's easy to read. But you start to notice the way Jesse watches him. Sideways glances. Little tests. Like he's waiting for Bob to prove something. Or betray something. And Bob, he plays the loyal lapdog. But you know better. You see how his eyes linger too long on Jesse's gun belt. How his voice trembles. Not from fear, but anticipation. There's something brewing there. Something ugly. One afternoon, Jesse rides back from a small job and finds a letter nailed to the barn door. No name. No return address. Just 3 words. We know where. He doesn't sleep that night. You hear him pacing the house. Whispering to himself. He digs up an old revolver. Checks the chamber. Then tucks it under his pillow. In the morning, he burns the letter in the stove and doesn't mention it again. But it's in his eyes now. That old fire, paranoia, anger, maybe even guilt, and underneath all of it, a weariness so heavy it could bend steel. One quirky detail, maybe too strange to be coincidence. Jesse starts wearing his boots to bed again. Not because he's planning to run, but because dying with your shoes off, he says, is for men who died too surprised. The robberies continue, though they're barely worth writing about. $100 here, $250 there. A general store payroll, a post office safe, small hits, risky ones, no big scores, no clean getaways, just enough to stay afloat, to keep moving, to keep pretending there's a plan. Z stops asking him to stop. You start wondering if Jesse's even capable of imagining a future anymore. He talks less about tomorrow, more about yesterday, repeats stories from the war, the good ones and the awful ones. You can't always tell which is which. One night, he tells you about bloody Bill Anderson again, how he looked right before a firefight. Grinning like death itself. He always smiled when things were about to end. Jesse says. Then he goes quiet for a long time. Maybe I'll do the same. You glance at Bob Ford the next day. He's polishing his pistol, eyes darting up when he notices you watching. He smiles. You try to smile back. It doesn't stick. You're inside the farmhouse now. A plain white house on Lafayette Street in St. Joseph, Missouri. Not a hideout, not a cave or a mountain shack or some outlaw lair lost in the brush. Just a rented home, close enough to neighbors that you can hear their dogs barking in the morning. It's April 3rd, 1882. Jesse James wakes early. His wife Z is already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. His children are upstairs, still warm in their beds. The sky is gray, cloud thick and slow, like even the weather is holding its breath. You hear Jesse whistling, nothing dramatic, just a soft, tuneless hum. You'd almost think today was ordinary. Almost. You're sitting in the parlor with Bob and Charlie Ford. The brothers are quiet. Charlie's pale, hungover or sick, maybe both. Bob is pretending to read the paper, but he hasn't turned a page in 15 minutes. Jesse walks in wearing a coat over his suspenders. His pistols are in the usual place, resting on the mantel. But then, he does something strange. He walks over, slowly takes off his gun belt, and sets it gently on the chair. This place is too warm for all this, he says, loosening his collar. Then he notices a dusty picture frame hanging on the wall, slightly crooked. He stands up on a chair to straighten it. And that's when it happens. A deafening crack. The gunshot startles the birds from the trees outside. You flinch. Jesse stumbles. There's a flash of blood at the back of his head. His body hits the floor hard. Awkwardly, like a sack of flour tipping sideways. No grace. No last words. No dramatic stare. Just silence. And standing behind him, gun still smoking in his hand, is Robert Ford. Bob looks stunned, like he didn't expect the bullet to work. Charlie's face twists. Not triumph. Not relief. Something more like nausea. You don't speak. No one moves. It's as if time has frozen. Like the whole room is waiting to see what kind of story it just became. Z screams upstairs. The children start to cry. Bob lowers the gun. Historians still argue whether Jesse let it happen. Whether he took off his guns because he trusted Bob, or because he was tired of carrying them. Some even suggest he sensed it coming and simply didn't care anymore. That he straightened the picture because he needed to give the Ford boys a clean angle. You'll never know for sure. But you do know this: Jesse James died at 34 years old, in the home he rented under a false name. Shot in the back of the head by a man he called a friend. The aftermath is immediate and messy. Bob and Charlie rush to the telegraph office, eager to claim their bounty. But the public, they don't see them as heroes. They see them as cowards. The dirty little coward. They start calling Bob. The nickname sticks. So does the guilt. Here's your fringe tidbit. Charlie Ford would later take his own life in a hotel room. Unable to live with what he'd done, Bob tried to cash in on the fame, toured the country in a stage play where he reenacted the murder. Night after night, he pantomimed shooting Jesse in the back. He was booed in some towns, cheered in others, but never admired. Years later, Bob himself would be shot and killed in a saloon by a man who said he was doing what Jesse should have done first. Poetic, if nothing else. And the body, it's laid out in a pine coffin for the public to see. Hundreds file past, eager to glimpse the face of the legend, pale, still, and oddly young. Someone cuts a lock of his hair. Someone else steals one of his boots. The line between mourning and memorabilia blurs fast. Z eventually brings Jesse's body home to Missouri. He's buried on the family farm. The gravestone reads, Jesse W. James, murdered April 3, 1882, by a traitor and coward, whose name is not worthy to appear here. But here's the twist: not everyone believed it was really Jesse in that coffin. Some said it was a trick, that Jesse had faked his death to escape the bounty. The paranoia, the endless cycle. Rumors spread of sightings: Jesse in Texas, Jesse in South America, Jesse selling horses under a new name. His mother, Zerelda, even leaned into the legend. She charged visitors 10 cents to see Jesse's grave and swore that her son had escaped. A few folks claimed she showed him a wax dummy and winked. Whether she believed it or not, hard to say. Historians still argue over those claims. DNA testing done a century later confirmed the body was likely Jesse's, but by then, the myth had grown legs too long to amputate. The man might be dead, but the story refused to lie down. And so you're left standing here, in the bloodstained parlor of a rented home in St. Joseph. A man has died, a legend has cracked, and something colder, more complicated, has taken its place. Because Jesse James wasn't just shot. He was silenced by one of his own. You step into the sideshow tent, ducking under a canvas flap painted with crude letters. See the body of Jesse James, the famous outlaw. Preserved. Inside, a pine coffin rests under dim gaslight. And in it, a figure that may or may not be Jesse lies in peaceful, waxy repose. His hair's too shiny, his boots too new, his skin, if it is skin, stretched oddly smooth. And yet, the crowd leans in, gasps, whispers, drops coins into the tin at the foot of the coffin like it's a shrine. Jesse's dead, probably, but death, as you now understand, is a slippery thing when it comes to men like him. In the years that follow April 3, 1882, Jesse's body becomes less important than what people believe they're seeing. His grave in Missouri draws thousands. His name gets carved into country songs, whispered through dirt roads, even taught, quietly, and off-syllabus, in certain schools below the Mason-Dixon line. But it's the doubt that keeps him alive. Because almost immediately after the murder, rumors begin to swirl. He ain't dead. That wasn't Jesse. I saw him in Texas last week, selling mules. Even Z, usually the quiet one, fans the flames in her own way. She tells one visitor, he died once, but not the way they said. She's vague on purpose, always just vague enough to sell one more ticket. You hear the fringe tales grow louder over time. One claims Jesse staged the whole thing, that he recruited a dying man to stand in for him, bribed the undertaker, and escaped under cover of night to South America. Another says he joined a religious commune in Oklahoma, gave up violence, and lived under the name James L. Courtney until dying of old age in 1943. That theory even has photographs, a marriage certificate, and, years later, DNA samples. Historians still argue over that one. Some say the DNA was flawed, the samples contaminated. Others insist it proves Jesse's grave holds the wrong man. The tests, done in the late 1990s, matched a relative of the Courtney family, just enough to confuse everyone. Not enough to shut the door. And it's not just one wax dummy you find in these backwater exhibits, it's half a dozen. Carnival barkers claim they bought Jesse's corpse from a cousin. Others say they exhumed the real body and preserved it with arsenic and frontier science. One show claims to have his shrunken head. Another offers genuine shirt fragments from the fatal day. All of it smells faintly of whiskey and sawdust. You pass a museum in Tennessee with a boot behind glass. The tag reads, "Believed to be worn by Jesse James." Believed, not confirmed, but that little crack of uncertainty, that's all the invitation a legend needs. You talk to a man in Kansas who swears Jesse stayed in his grandfather's barn in 1894. He told me, the old man rasps, told me his real name, too, said he just wanted to die quiet. He stares at you with the dead certainty of someone who needs it to be true. For some, Jesse isn't a person anymore. He's the idea that rebellion never dies. It gets stranger. In the 1920s, an old man claiming to be Jesse James turns himself into authorities. He's leathery, shriveled, wearing a battered hat and boots. Says his name is J. Frank Dalton. Claims Bob Ford never killed him. That it was all staged. Offers details only the real Jesse might have known. Bank names. Family law, secret scars. A few believe him, a few want to. He dies in 1951 at the age of 103. He's buried under a gravestone that reads, Jesse Woodson James, September 5, 1847 August 15, 1951. Supposedly killed in 1882. Supposedly, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back in 1882, after Jesse's confirmed death, the newspapers explode. Obituaries read like closing credits on a Western epic. The notorious outlaw finally meets his end. Some celebrate, others mourn. A few, strangely, do both. His mother, Zerelda, leans into the moment with morbid flair. She starts offering tours of the family farm. For a dime, you can see Jesse's childhood room. For a quarter, you can touch his old saddle. And for $1, she'll tell you her version of the night the Pinkertons blew off her arm and killed her youngest boy. She always emphasizes murder, never death. Zerelda lives a long time. Long enough to watch her son become a full-blown American myth. And the James family, they stay quiet for a while. Z raises the kids as best she can. She rarely gives interviews, but when she does, she talks about Jesse not as a hero or a villain, but as a man who just wanted to go home. You can feel the ache in her voice when she says it. And maybe, if you squint hard enough, that's all Jesse really was, a man who didn't know how to stop running. Yet for all the talk of redemption, wax bodies, and DNA tests, the truth clings to one simple fact: Jesse James became bigger in death than he ever was in life. He transcended outlaw. He became legend. The kind people shape like clay and retell in flickering campfires and scratchy old ballads. You walk past another sideshow banner, painted with a galloping horse and a bandit's silhouette. The tagline reads, Jesse James lives. And in a way, he does. Not in the flesh, not behind some alias on a dusty porch, but in the strange, sprawling space between truth and story, where history stops checking facts and starts printing legends. You sit down at the table, the kind of wooden, splintered piece of furniture that's seen generations come and go. Outside, the wind slides through a cotton field gone quiet, and the porch swing creaks gently like a lullaby out of tune. You followed Jesse James through every twist of road, every bullet-fired betrayal, and now it's time to ask the question that's haunted America for over a century. Was he a hero, an outlaw, or just a cold-blooded killer? The answer? You already know it's not simple. Jesse's story is a strange cocktail of contradictions. He robbed trains, sure, but sometimes spared passengers. He shot unarmed men, but quoted the Bible while doing it. He claimed to stand for the South, for the downtrodden, for justice, but never once gave away a stolen dollar to the poor. And yet, people loved him for reasons that had little to do with truth. You think about the boy Jesse, barefoot, Missouri-born, shaped by war and blood and whispers about honor. The one who watched his stepfather hanged by Union soldiers. The one whipped across the back for being born on the wrong side of a burning country. That boy never really got to grow up. Instead, he became something else. He became a ghost riding a horse with no direction but revenge. Historians still argue whether Jesse James was driven more by politics or personal pain. Whether he believed in the Confederate cause or just found it convenient. Whether he truly saw himself as a rebel, or simply wanted the power that came with pretending to be one. The truth is, Jesse James was a chameleon. To some, he was Robin Hood. To others, a terrorist. To his family, a husband and father who couldn't stop sleeping with one eye open. And to the Pinkertons, he was the one who got away, until he didn't. You think back to the moments where it could have gone differently. After the war, Jesse could have disappeared into farming. He could have followed Frank's path, quietly teaching school or tending land. Instead, he doubled down on his rage and stitched it into every robbery. Every bullet. Why? Because revenge feels like purpose when nothing else fits. It's hard to ignore the chilling pattern. Jesse didn't just kill to survive. Sometimes, he killed to be seen, to be remembered, to be feared. There's no glory in murdering a bank clerk who just flinched. But Jesse never apologized, never slowed down, never truly looked back, unless it was to make sure no one was following too closely. Even his death is soaked in contradiction. Shot in the back by a man he trusted, in a house he paid for, while straightening a picture he probably didn't care about. If there's poetry in that, it's the dark kind, the kind scrawled in the margins of American history textbooks no one reads anymore. And yet, we still talk about him. Ballads were written, books were published, wax figures were built. The name Jesse James became a placeholder for rebellion, real or imagined. For a rugged kind of freedom that didn't care much for rules or consequences. You hear whispers of him in modern outlaws, in protest slogans, in the half-grin of someone who believes they've outsmarted the system. Jesse isn't just a man now, he's a feeling, but feelings aren't facts. Here's one last quirky tidbit. The revolver that killed Jesse James was sold at auction more than 100 years later, for over $350. Not because it was rare, not because it was beautiful, but because of what it meant. Even in death, Jesse was still turning a profit. You lean back, the story weighing on your chest like a vest full of iron. The wind rustles outside. Somewhere in Missouri, a tourist takes a picture next to Jesse's gravestone, smiling like they knew him. Maybe. In a way, they do. So who was Jesse James? A hero? Only if you like your heroes bleeding from the seams. An outlaw? Undeniably. But a cold-blooded killer? Yes, and something worse. He was human. And that's what makes him so dangerous. Word count, 1.073. Wind down, 300 words. Now, let your shoulders drop just a little. You've walked a long road tonight, through dust and gunpowder, across prairie and betrayal, alongside a man who never once sat still. Jesse James may be buried, but his legend, well, it has a habit of slipping out the back door and galloping into the next town over. It's strange how some names stick like burrs to history's coat. Not because they're noble, not because they're right, but because they remind us of something in ourselves we don't want to say out loud. Anger, pride, the need to be remembered. But you can let that go now. Let the story settle behind your eyes like smoke after a fire. The gunfights have faded. The horses have stopped. You're not on the run anymore. You're safe. Take a deep breath and let the dust clear from your thoughts. Imagine the world without telegrams. Without bounty posters. Without people paying to touch the stones over someone else's ghost. Just you, the stars, and the low hum of something too old to name. Jesse's gone now. Not hiding, not haunting, just gone. So close your eyes if you'd like. Or keep them open a little longer if sleep still feels far away. Either way, you made it. And whether you think Jesse was a villain, a hero, or just a very tired man with a gun and a bad memory, tonight, at least, you understand him a little better. Sweet dreams.